And now back to our main topic of the day, as Serbia reiterates its support for Ukraine and Volodymyr Zelenskyy calls for more drone deliveries from Ukraine's allies. And to talk about it and more, we're joined by Mark Toth, co-founder of the Intercept 360. Good evening.
Good evening, Maciej, to you and your viewers.
So, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić believes the war in Ukraine will not end anytime soon and forecasts a rather difficult winter for Ukrainians. How do you rate Ukraine's preparedness for this, I guess, worst-case scenario?
Yeah, Maciej, my colleague John Sweet and I several days ago wrote that in the Hill in Washington, D.C., that Putin is indeed going to try to weaponize winter again. We're seeing him try to set those conditions now. The recent strikes, the ballistic missile strikes especially, combined with drone strikes in Kyiv and other major cities, is a precursor of what's to come. And so, I think, although I'm rare to agree with Aleksandar Vučić, certainly a person who in the past has been fairly pro-Russian, but he is right. A typical winter is coming for Ukraine, especially because it has such a shortage of key Patriot interceptors that are needed to stop these Patriot missiles. So reluctantly, I agree with Vučić. I think there's going to be some trying times, but I do believe that Ukraine will overcome them and withstand them.
So what do you make of these expressions of support for Ukraine coming, as you said, surprisingly, I guess, from Serbia's Vučić, who's rather known for keeping close relations with Vladimir Putin?
No, it's a great question because I think it's just a question of duplicity when it comes to Vučić. This is a man that has to survive in both worlds. His country is essentially, in the majorities pro-Russian. He himself is pro-Putin, but he has to survive in a European Union-type world. So I think what he's trying to do is thread the needle here, not get on the bad side of Putin, just stick behind international law, which is why you keep seeing him constantly raise the United Nations definition of territorial integrity and siding with that. But for the most part, I think it's, lip service. I will say one thing, at a minimum, at least as long as he continues to support Ukraine's accession to the European Union, then that's a good thing. And so far, Vučić is saying that. But again, I don't think he's going to be a key ally anytime soon of Ukraine. I think he'll continue to play it both ways.
Apparently, Ukraine has this agreement with the US on monthly deliveries of Patriot interceptors. But President Zelenskyy is also specifically asking Poland and Germany for more air defense deliveries. Why exactly Poland and Germany?
Yeah, Maciej, the Patriot interceptors, is obviously a critical component of Ukraine's ability to defend itself. The dilemma that it faces is that, in addition to the United States, there are 16 other countries that rely on Patriot defense systems: Israel, Japan, other U.S. allies around the world. And as we've seen just recently, many of the Gulf states, which are going through them quickly as a result of the U.S.-Iranian war. And so there's just simply not enough of them in the U.S. supply system. Pre-conflict, meaning going all the way back to February of 2022, the U.S. had roughly 2,200 of these intercepts. They're now down to 800. Just if you compare that alone, the rate at which Russia's firing ballistic missiles this year at Ukraine, it's estimated to be 900 of them by year's end. The U.S. can only produce 600. So Ukraine has got to make up these differences somehow, somewhere. And that's why you're seeing them reach out to Germany and to Poland to say, look, the fight is here. The defense of Europe is here in Kyiv. We need these to protect our civilians. So that's why they're turning out of necessity, because they're not going to get enough relief soon enough. Even if they can get this ultimate license from the U.S. to produce Patriots on their own, there's still going to be a window here into the fall and winter 2026, and arguably probably early in 2027, before alternatives can come online to the Patriot.
Now, about defending Europe, Russian forces are approaching Kramatorsk, and they have ordered civilians to evacuate the city. Now, what is the current situation on the front line, I'm wondering, and how important for Ukraine's defense is this particular stronghold we're talking about?
Yeah, I think, Maciej, in terms of any Russian advances, it's always important to remember it's one thing to advance, it's one thing to move forward. It's quite another to be able to exploit that. And so far, based on any of the advances that they've done at this point in the war in the last 2 years or so, they're not able to exploit it. In other words, they can't turn it into a bigger, push. And certainly, Ukraine has done a masterful job of deciding, look, we'll trade territory for Russian casualties. They do so reluctantly. Obviously, they don't want to give up territory if they can avoid it. But I wouldn't overread into any one of these movements. Ukraine so far has proven to be very resilient over the 4+ years of this war to basically adjust and eventually stop these Russian offenses if they occur.
And what do you make of these alleged U.S. intelligence reports on Russia's plans to conduct some military operation against NATO as soon as this autumn?
Yeah, no, Maciej, it's very plausible. Look, Putin in many ways is cornered because Ukraine has done an effective job of bringing the war home to St. Petersburg, to Moscow. Gas shortages are one way, seeing the refineries burn another. But now they've gone to the heart of many Russians, at least the wealthy Russians in Moscow and in St. Petersburg, got pocketbooks by seeing these wild berries, these distribution hubs burned. And in that regard is showing Putin that he can't hide the defeats, the losses, et cetera, that he's taking on the battlefield. So I think for him, he's got to look for asymmetric ways, almost doing what the Iranians have done. One of those ways could be a hybrid warfare, with Europe, and I would already argue he's already done that. You just saw this drone, as you reported at the top of your news hour here, that was placed next to the Ukrainian air transport that had an explosive on it. And so they're already starting to take that hybrid war. We've seen it in terms of assassinations already. We've seen it in terms of espionage. We've seen it in terms of bombs, at the DHL facilities in Germany and in England. So that war is already underway. I think he might well up it, and he might get more reckless with drones that, as we just saw in Bulgaria, that are starting to wander into native territory. So he's looking for different ways to get Europe to pause and say, hey, do we really want to support Ukraine? Under no circumstances should Europe fall for that. They need to remain strong.
Mm-hmm. Now, what do you think of do you think that the White House will finally approve this so-called Lindsey Graham bill that's basically sanctions against Russia's energy sector and its recipients, and how powerful a tool this would be for the U.S. administration?
Yeah, Maciej, it's a great question because this kind of gets inside the Beltway, and I do write for publications in Washington, D.C. Look, Trump supports this bill. The Senate passed it overwhelmingly. However, there is a problem as it goes to the House. This bill contains one way of getting Trump's support to it. Lindsey Graham, before he died, made it about giving Trump increased tariff powers, meaning the ability to apply tariffs against all countries, not just Ukraine. Russia was put into this bill. Now, in the House of Representatives, under the U.S. Constitution, all bills having to do with revenue have to originate from the House. This bill originated from the Senate. So Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the U.S. Congress, or House of Representatives, is going to have to jump through some hoops so that if this bill does get passed, it's not declared unconstitutional if somebody takes it to court. And they would probably do so simply because of the tariff powers, the increased tariff powers above and beyond Russia that it would give Trump. And you've got 80 or so Republicans that are probably against just based on their own political beliefs. So it's going to take bipartisan support to get it passed in the House. And many of those Democrats are also going to object because of the tariff powers. So it's not yet a done deal. I think eventually they will get there. I think the criticality of what Ukraine needs now is important, and these secondary Russian sanctions would be vital in terms of achieving that. But I think you're going to see a lot of political drama play out in the House of Representatives sometime in the month of September when they return from their summer recess.
Mark Toth, co-founder of Intercept 360, was our guest this evening. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, as always. And thank you for watching, and stay with us for more interviews and news here on TVP World.